Hi, my name's Zach Varda, and this week on the Student Slant, we talked to Sheridan Hendrix of the Columbus Dispatch about moving from a college newspaper to a professional one.
So we had just gotten the SPJ awards. The Lantern swept the college journalism section, so I had texted Spencer to ask him, like, hey, did you see that the awards came out? We swept everything. I'd say we did pretty great. And we were texting a little bit, and I was like, hey, you want to hear some, like, more cool news? He was like, yes. And I was like, I officially got offered a job at the Dispatch. He was like, what? I was like, yep. He said, sorry, could you repeat? And I said, hey, your girl got a job. He was like, wow, that's great. And he sent me an emoji, and I was like, this is so cool. Spencer, like, cares about me, and I got a job. He said, what job? And I said, I'm covering Licking County. And he said, very cool. And I was like, I'm a very happy Lantern person. He said, not anymore. Now you're a happy Dispatch person, as it should be. And I was like, always a proud Lantern alum, Spencer. He said, you earned it. Very proud. And I was like, wow, Spencer's proud of me. This is great. And I'm Sheridan Hendrix.
I'm Zach Varda.
And I'm Jake Ray, and this is the Student Slant. How have your experiences in college, moving into like from the Lantern and stuff like that, in the journalism program at Ohio State? How did that get you to the Dispatch?
So I was an intern last summer, and the last time that I was on this podcast talking about the Dispatch was talking about my first internship. And then during the school year, I stayed on during weekends, and I covered cops on Sundays. And then applied for a job, stayed on for a second internship, and then landed in my current position, which is covering Licking County and Eastern Ohio for the Dispatch out in our Newark, Ohio bureau. So, I mean, everything that I've learned, like, at the Dispatch so far is really just building on everything that I've learned at the Lantern. Like, something that we were talking about in SPJ earlier is, like, why join the Lantern? Why get involved in extracurriculars in journalism, not just taking the classes? And one thing that I was saying in there is, like, just how important working for a newspaper is, working for the Lantern is, because you're not going to get that experience anywhere else unless you're willing to go to the middle of nowhere and make next to nothing just writing, which some people are. And, like, I think that's a really important experience. But I think now just the way that journalism is, and from what I've seen and experienced myself, but also heard from people who are older than me, there's just a lot fewer newspapers, so there's a lot fewer opportunities to really get that, like, on the ground experience. And we are just so blessed, like, at Ohio State to have the Lantern and have the program that we do have here, because you really are thrown in and covering big time stories. Like, Ohio State has its own zip code. It's a small city for all intents and purposes. So the stuff that we're covering actually matters, and the stuff that we're covering, like, makes a difference in someone's life. And the experience that you're going to get here, everything that you learn, you're just going to continue to build off of at your next job.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder that while, like, doing the job here, getting that paper out. I'm always curious if it's really going to feel that way. So it's kind of nice to hear that going there, it's just building on what you already know. Was the environment a little bit different, at least, though? Like, coming in, like, knowing you had to, I guess, are not working at a student newspaper anymore, that this is an actual publication. A lot of people read this. I mean, a lot of people read the Lantern as well, but it's a whole entire city. Like, we're a zip code. Yeah, like, we might be a small town, but it's Columbus. It's the entire city.
Yeah.
So, and you're not even covering just Columbus. Like, it's a large area.
No, yeah, I have, like, 7 counties that I technically cover. So, I mean, it's definitely, like, an added pressure. Like, you think about the number of people that are reading your stories, it's kind of crazy. And thinking about the reach, like, it's just kind of insane. But it is kind of like that added pressure of, like, not that the work that was done during my time at the Lantern was unimportant, or the work that is currently being done there is unimportant, because it really does make an impact. I had someone just last week call me when I was driving home that runs a small paper in Minnesota who read one of my stories and was somehow distantly connected to it and wanted to run it in his paper. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, that's like my college work getting run at a small local daily in a city that I've never heard of in Minnesota. But it's definitely different. Like working in the newsroom downtown at the Dispatch is just definitely different than working in a college newspaper. Something that I really loved about working at the Lantern is just the amount of collaboration that you get.
Yeah.
Because like that's just how you're going to learn. Like everyone's peers, but everyone's kind of at a different level too. Some people have been doing it for 3 years. Other people have just been getting into it. This is their first taste of journalism. So they're really like everyone's kind of on different pages. So you just get to learn from one another so much. And that's just natural. Like we all sit right next to one another. You're like, can you read this? Can you read that? How would you write this? Is this right AP style? Like, what should we make the headline? Just all these questions. You're constantly like working with one another. Not that that doesn't happen at the Dispatch, but it's just different because people have been doing it for a long time. And there's just not as much conversation, at least that I experienced with it, which is something that I actually really miss about being at the Lantern sometimes, is just the amount of collaboration that could happen. And on top of that, now I work in a bureau. So I work out in Licking County by myself. So I don't go downtown every day. I go down maybe every other week if I'm just writing and not reporting one day. But so it really is like it's just me. I'm by myself. Completely different from working at the Lantern because there's absolutely no one else with me that's a journalist. So most of my conversations with people are either emails or phone calls with my editors just to kind of touch base with what I'm doing, and like text throughout the day with my friends that are working downtown just to see what's going on or what they're working on.
You said at the Lantern that it's just like that collaborative nature, which you're right. It's just really nice being able to work together with everything. This past summer with that internship, was it similar to that, like having the collaboration with different interns? Or did you get to your internship and they kind of dropped you in the deep end and that kind of would help you build on your already prior knowledge at the Lantern? Because you said at the internship, then you went to your job now, you're out there alone and covering 7 counties. Mm-hmm. So did it feel like that those last couple months of that internship made those building blocks stronger and then they just kind of dropped you in the deep end to say like, use what you know?
I mean, okay, so I worked in the features department this past summer instead of on Metro, which was my first internship at the Dispatch. And features is just a lot different. One thing that I really loved about features this summer, as opposed to working on Metro last summer, is that I got a lot of feedback on my writing and a lot of feedback on my copy. Not a lot of people like to have their copy really heavily edited, but I'm like, if there are problems, like let me know and let me know how I can be a better writer. So one thing that I liked a lot about working down in features is that I was more independent. I pitched stories. They gave me stories to do at the beginning of the summer, but for the most part, I was working really independently. Not that anyone at the Dispatch has ever really been like a helicopter, like just watching over me all the time, but it really did kind of give me that taste of like, okay, even though you're in a newsroom and you're working with people, you need to learn how to pitch your own stories. You need to be an advocate for yourself and learn to be independent, learn to get your stuff edited and go from there. So it definitely did make the transition out to Newark a little bit easier because it's not like I was also the only intern down on features this summer. So I was in a room with people that had been working there for, a few years to 20 years already, as opposed to last summer where I was working with interns. I was sitting like right next to a bunch of them. So it's not that I didn't really like ever hang out with other interns, but it definitely was less collaborative with interns this summer for me, which I think prepared me to just kind of be thrown out into Newark to be by myself.
What's it like, I guess, going from where you're at the last year of the Lantern, where you're one of the people on staff who's been there the longest, you're the projects reporter, and you're the one that everybody's coming to advice, to then, like, 2 months later, you are brand new, and you're next to someone who's been doing it for, like, 30 years. Like, that's a pretty dramatic shift in dynamic. Like, what's that kind of like experiencing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's pretty humbling a lot of the time. Like, not that I not that like here at the Lantern I thought like, man, I'm so great, I like got it all together, I got it all figured out, but I definitely felt confident in my abilities as a college journalist when I was here, which I don't think is a bad thing. At the same time, I recognize that I still have so much left to learn, and I'm still so early on in my career that I need other people to help me. So I think not just with starting my job, but also like while I was in my internship, like really having to get over my fear of like looking stupid and not knowing what I'm doing, and just asking people for help and not being afraid of that. I was in an interview with someone today for a story that I'm working on that I really know absolutely nothing about, and even after reading articles about it and doing my research, I like walked into the interview and I'm like, I am still really ignorant about this topic and I don't know a lot about it. Like, can you help me learn and can you help me figure this out? Holly Zachariah, who's one of my mentors at the Dispatch, she also works on the state desk, so she covers counties as well. She works downtown though, but she's on the road a lot. So there have been some times where I've just like texted her or called her and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't know if I'm doing this right and it's kind of confusing. Help. So it's definitely like kind of overwhelming sometimes, but I think remembering that I am still really young and there's high expectations for me, but I'm also putting them on myself. But people want to help and people want to be advocates for us. It's the same as when you walk into the newsroom at the Lantern for your first time and you're either in 2221 in Nicole's class or you're like walking in to be an independent study and all of the editors are like looking at their computers and you're just like, I shouldn't be here. Like, no one's talking to me. I shouldn't be here at all. But it's like making yourself known, being an advocate for yourself is like the biggest thing that you could ever do, which is what I'm still learning to have to do.
Overall, like you said, you came in with those building blocks from the paper here, but what skills do you think you learned the most in that last summer in the features desk that you think you've carried with you into your job now?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I learned in my last internship is craft, specifically writing. One thing that I really valued in my first internship was just like cutting my teeth in journalism and realizing like, wow, I really can do this and I can pick up the phone and talk to people on their worst day and ask them really hard questions and make people feel comfortable sharing their stories. Like really learning how to report was a big part of my first summer, and I feel really grateful for that. But writing is something that I want to continue to get better at. I feel like I'm a stronger reporter than I am a writer. And Marilyn Plageman, who's the features editor at the Dispatch, she edited my copy so well, and I'm really grateful for it because, like I said earlier, like some people feel really like touchy about people editing their work, and they're like, "Oh, but this is my baby. Like, how could you tear this apart? How could you say that that's a terrible lead?" Like, no, it's not. But it's like, if it is, then it is, and it needs to be worked on. And something that I really appreciate about Mary Lynn is like, she would go through your copy and make a lot of changes, but then be like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Like, if you don't agree with something, then let's talk about how to make it better. And there are just so many little things that I got used to because that's just what I thought that's just how I thought you were supposed to write. That's how I thought you were supposed to phrase a quote or put the attribution there. Or, write this really long sentence because it has all these great words in it. And I think learning the craft of writing and like really trying to work on that more was something that was really helpful for me this summer. Is like, okay, let's work on sentence variety. Let's like cut these really long sentences. Let's mix it up a little bit so that not everything is sounding exactly the same.
You had kind of a different position at the Lantern where you were a projects reporter your last year, so you get to do like these month-long stories with a ton of data, a ton of, maybe interviewing the subject multiple times. Kind of wondering how that work as a projects reporter helped prepare you moving over to the Dispatch, if it did, or if maybe it was like weird kind of going from like writing these like, months long and then transitioning back to like doing your day in, day out reporting.
Especially like being on the features desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's something that I really love. I really love doing projects reporting. That's what I want to do long term. But what was really good about that experience was that it got me really comfortable working with a subject for a long time. Some people really don't like doing projects reporting because they like something new every day. And I think that's a really great thing about journalism is that there's always something new and there's always something that has to fill the paper. But then there's a lot of subjects that deserve more than a day or more than an hour of your time. And getting a chance to do that while I was here and getting a chance to really see, like, okay, this is what it looks like to spend 6 months with the same story and the same data and trying to get these interviews with people that keep blowing me off and spending more time with these families. And I really appreciated that and really loved having that experience because it made me want it more. And I think as far as my daily reporting goes, like, I'm writing stories a lot during the week, and maybe I'm not in the paper every day, but there are sometimes I'm in the paper 3 or 4 times a week. And I think the experience that I had as a projects reporter here has helped me with that because it's made me just think more about the stories that I'm writing as opposed to like, oh yeah, here's a press release, I'll just like write something up about it. It's like, oh, well, maybe I could like go to this person's house that this story is about and like just like spend some time with them just to like get some color for the story, or like, oh, I'll like maybe look up a public record about this or see if there's any data about it so I can make it more of a broader story than just this like quick hit. Just being able to like do more with what you're given, because there's press releases every day, like there's always something that's happening, but what are you going to do to make the story a little bit deeper or something that more of our readers could relate to, or something that our readers would never even think about had they not, opened the paper that day and saw your byline.
When you say like realizing there's still so much more to learn, it reminds me of how Spencer talks about how journalism is like a craft. Because I think for a lot of things when you got out of college, it's kind of like, okay, you've learned everything you need to learn. Now you can kind of be plugged in somewhere to do a job. But with journalism, there's still so much room to expand. I guess you kind of already talked about what is it kind of coming to that realization where like, wow, I reached like the pinnacle of my college journalism and like that's great, that's something to be proud of, but like there's still like so much to learn from like veteran reporters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, being one of the youngest people to just be hired on at the Dispatch really gives you an idea of just the wealth of institutional knowledge that a place like the Dispatch has. There's only so much you can learn in like 3 or 4 years while you're in college, but then once you start your professional career, you're just going to keep learning and building on things and learning from other people that know way more and will always know way more than you. So I don't even know if I'm totally answering your question, but it's just like just seeing the amount of like wealth of knowledge that people have and being like, okay, I like need to learn from these people if I'm ever going to get to their point, because they're not going to be around forever, which means that then I have to step up and like learn these things. Yeah, and journalism's like always changing too. Like I remember Jono Sarah, who was with the New York Times for a long time and now is with Bloomberg. He's a columnist. He came to talk to us, I think my like freshman or sophomore year, and he was talking about how, journalists today like have to learn all this stuff. They have to learn video and photo and Twitter and this and that. But he's like, but you still have to learn how to report. You still have to learn how to write. And if you can't do those things, then you're not going to make it. But it's like learning how to do those things really well. You just have to continue to learn how to do them and be willing to learn from other people. Otherwise, you're just going to be the dude that thinks that he knows everything and is untouchable.
Do you think that's the advice you'd give to people most of all? Like what you learned the most from your internship is like taking down kind of your ego and making sure to like say, oh, I don't know that much still and I have a lot to learn?
I think that's like a huge thing. That was a big warning that I got. Not that I was like this super egotistical like college junior going into my internship at the Dispatch, but talking with people that used to work there or currently work there, it's like you just don't want to be that guy that thinks that they know everything, and you come in and you're like some hotshot college journalist who can teach everyone everything, and you probably do have a lot to learn, and you probably do have a lot that you can, teach people and have people learn from you. But if you're just like untouchable and you think that you're super cool and that there's nothing that anyone could ever do to make you better, then you're never going to learn. But I think the biggest piece of advice that I give people who are either still in school or young journalists like me is like, find a mentor. And I think it's in the same vein of like just continuing to learn and continuing to get better. But it's like you need to be able to have like good relationships with people that are going to be really upfront with you. Because if you don't have mentors and you don't have people that you can rely on and really go to and ask for help, then you're not going to ever want to ask for help because you're always going to feel too embarrassed or always feel like, oh, no one knows me well enough and no one knows my situation well enough. Like, just finding people that you really trust and trusting that they're going to really help guide you and help you make you a better journalist at the end of the day.
That was a great discussion. Join us next week on the Student Slant for more student perspective.